Are you new to the content creation space or filmmaking? If I could get in the time machine with Doc Brown and go back and save myself from making these 5 mistakes, I would. Hey everybody, what's going on? Happy New Year. Hope everybody had a terrific holiday. It's 2024, and that marks the 5th year of me doing Flying Lap Media. In that time making films, I've learned a lot and I've made many mistakes along the way, some of them very costly. I thought it might be interesting to throw together the 5 biggest mistakes that I made when starting out in the hopes that a beginning filmmaker might find this video and learn something from my blunders. Obviously, if you're an experienced filmmaker, you might as well skip to the next video because most of this won't apply to you. But if you're just getting started in your journey, perhaps some of these tips and tricks may help. Mistake number 1, I'm sure we've all made this one, the gear fetish. What do I mean? When I first started out making video content, I thought I needed a Canon 1DX Mark II. Why? Because all of the popular YouTube celebrities were using it to make content. I was obsessed with slow motion B-roll and gratuitous shots of people making coffee. Of course, in hindsight, I realize now that the camera I chose for the job was all wrong. Not only was it primarily a stills camera that dabbled in video, I bought something that was ill-equipped to do what I was wanting to do. The 1DX Mark II was great for what it was, an action sport still camera, but it suffered with things like dynamic range, rolling shutter, and lacking much of the professional video scopes and waveforms that you need to get a proper exposure. Had I put my ego aside and simply bought the right tool for the job, I could have saved a lot of time and money. What's the takeaway here? Simple. Stop buying. It's very easy to get swept up in your favorite YouTube channel reviewing gear and thinking that you immediately need it. Over the years, I've met several people who think their next great edit is a single purchase away, when in fact, chances are they're probably not even getting the most from the gear that they already own. One great alternative to buying gear right off the bat that I wish I had considered was renting gear. Sometimes a great review is incredibly helpful, but there's no substitute for something in your hands, the tactile feeling, how it integrates with your workflow. So don't be afraid to rent something before making the leap and purchasing it. Mistake number 2 that I made very often when starting out was ignoring the fundamentals of a good image. Let me explain. The easiest way in 2024 to tell an amateur from a professional are things like white balance and exposure. All too often in 2019, I was so fixated on getting that buttery slow motion B-roll that I paid little to no attention on actually getting the image properly balanced. Much of the footage from 2019 that I look at now was drastically overexposed. Sure, I was using those ND filters that we all have seen promoted on YouTube, but I didn't really factor in how much ND I would need, when the best time to use it, or different things like color cast that a variable ND could potentially introduce. Had I slowed down, pumped the brakes, I could have saved myself a ton of hassle. Spam, don't they know I'm filming something? God. Hello, is this Peter McKinnon? So the takeaway here is simple. Learn to use waveforms and vector scopes. Make these your North Star with anything that you shoot. And more importantly, learn the appropriate settings for the camera that you're using. Oftentimes, many cameras will suggest that you expose to the left or expose to the right, which in English means you might be slightly overexposing or underexposing to get the optimal image from your camera. Mistake number 3 that I'm guilty of committing when first starting out was paying little to no attention to audio and music. Because I was so fixated on that 120 frames per second B-roll, I failed to consider that the Canon 1DX Mark II at the time didn't record audio with slow motion, which meant when I got the footage back into the editing software, I effectively had a silent movie. In 2019, services like Epidemic Sound or Artlist weren't around or were just getting started, so it was much harder to find the appropriate music to use when creating an edit. Nowadays, this is not the case, and there's a handful of services all offering premium content, whether that be music or sound effects, for you to ignore this very important thing. There have been quite a few studies that suggest people will more easily tolerate bad video with good audio than they will the inverse. Let that be an important lesson. People consume your content with their eyes and their ears. Good music and sound design will be the glue that holds any good piece of content together. Mistake number 4 is a popular one that I see a lot of filmmakers today still making, and certainly one that I made when starting out. And that is to get too fancy too quickly. What do I mean? If I had $1 for every filmmaker who was selling their cinematic LUT pack, or their masterclass, or their transition bundle, I would be a very wealthy person. That's not to say that these things that people are selling don't have their place, but more often than not, this is akin to buying more frosting without learning how to bake the cake. Much of the early work that I created relied way too heavily on these special effects. And in truth, it was simply to overcome the shortcomings by not mastering the fundamentals. What's the takeaway here? Of course, LUTs and overlays and things of that nature have their time and place. But my rule of thumb in 2024 is, if it doesn't genuinely add to the story or the content, leave it out. Mistake number 5 that I made when starting out was not considering the audience, and more importantly, the platform. Let me unpack that. When I first started out creating content in 2019, I didn't think much about where it might ultimately live. It's easy to forget, but in 2019, TikTok wasn't a thing, which means Instagram Reels weren't a thing, and heck, even vertical video wasn't a thing. Boy, do I miss those days. In any case, arguably, in 2024, vertical video is really the only thing, and horizontal video oftentimes is an afterthought. Which means in 2024, you'll want to be very deliberate about where you intend for your content to live and how you envision people consuming it. Having a plan will save you tons of hassle and heartache when you're actually hitting record, so that you're just not randomly rolling footage in the hopes that it'll all come together in the editing suite. And this last mistake or / tip might seem contradictory, so we'll call it a bonus tip, and that is to not consider the audience. Chris, what do we mean? That makes no sense. Here's what that means. Because of the previous tip in considering the platform, unfortunately, oftentimes that spawns a bunch of copycat work. Everybody, understandably, is keen on having their work get eyeballs and/or potentially go viral, which means, regrettably, oftentimes you see people repeating the same trend over and over and over to simply replicate or take advantage of something that's very popular. The point being here, making passion projects might just be the ones that get you on people's radars. Personally speaking, many of the edits that I've made on my own time and my own dime have been the ones that resonated the most with people. Why? Because they're not like everything else that they see on social media. Don't be afraid to make something that you feel the most passionate about and put it out into the universe. If you like it, that's the most important thing. This bit from famous music producer Rick Rubin sums up that point perfectly.
I'm not making it for them. I'm making it for me. And it turns out that when you make something truly for yourself, you're doing the best thing you possibly can for the audience. So much of why, if you go to the movies, so many big movies just not good. It's because they're not being made by a person who cares about it. They're being made by people who are trying to make something that they think someone else is going to like. And that's not how art works. That's something else. It's not art. That's commerce.
The caveat here with that point is if you're doing paid client work, beauty, as they say, is in the eye of the check holder. The client will have the final say. My advice, though, don't be afraid to take that same footage and experiment or make something that's authentic to you. The more passionate you are about the process, the more engaged you're going to be long term. Obviously, these tips are not for the experienced filmmaker. Perhaps I'm catching somebody just dipping their toe into the content creation space. If there's a question you think that I could answer or something of benefit that I can give you and you have a question, please let me know in the comments below and I will do my best to answer. And with that, I'll wrap up the video. Heartfelt thank you. Good luck to everybody out there in 2024, and I will see you in the next one.